Hi, welcome back. Our previous lesson was on the first part of the labor demand. Today we'll be continuing with part two. In our previous lesson, we saw that firms are going to follow a rational rule and hire up to the point where the wage that they pay an additional worker is equal to the benefit that that additional worker brings to the labor force. So the wage is in terms of the cost of hiring that additional worker, and then the marginal revenue product is in terms of the benefit that the additional worker brings to the market. Today, we are going to look at that rational rule in detail and relate it to profit maximization. So, to maximize profit, firms will have to continue hiring until the wages that they pay an additional worker is equal to the marginal revenue product that additional worker brings to the market. So since wages represent the cost of production and then the marginal revenue product represents the revenue, we can say this in profit maximization as a firm maximizes profit up to the point where the difference between the total revenue and the total cost is at the highest. Now let's look at this in detail using this example. Now we consider the example of a restaurant, and we have the number of workers, the total output, total revenue, total cost, and the profit. So we are going to use the information that we have here to calculate our total revenue, total cost, profit, and then find the optimal level of workers that a firm should hire. So we have total revenue as the price of a good times the total output that is produced. So we say the total quantity, or you can simply write it as Q. Then we have total cost as the wage you pay a worker times the number of workers that you have. So we have number of workers. And then we have profit as the difference between the total revenue and the total cost. So let's start with our calculation for the total revenue. So we said that the total revenue is the price times the quantity. So the price in this example is fixed at 20. So when we had one worker, the total output produced was 40 and the price is 20 per meal produced. So that gives us a total revenue of 800. When the restaurant increased the number of workers to 2, total output increased to 75. So total revenue is now 75 times 20, which is 1,500. When the number of workers increased to 3, total output increased to 105. So total revenue is now 105 times 20, which is 2,100. When the number of workers increased to 4, total output increased to 130. Total revenue is 130 times the price, with that is 2,600. And when the number of workers increased to 5, total output increased to 150. Total revenue is therefore 150 times 20, which is 3,000. Now let's move on to the total cost. We know the total cost here is the wage that you pay per worker times the number of workers that you employ. So when the worker was just one person, the total cost is simply the wage that you pay that worker. So in this example, we fix the wage as 500. So for one worker, the total cost is simply 500. Now for two workers, the total cost is now the wage per worker times the number of workers, which is 2. So 500 times 2, which is 1,000. When the workers increase to 3, total cost increased to 1,500, which is the number of workers, which is 3 times the wage per worker, which is 500. When the restaurant employed 4 workers, total cost is now 500, which is the wage, times the number of workers, which is 4, which is now 2,000. Now, when the number of workers increased to 5, total cost is 5 times 500, which is 2,500. Now let's move on to the profit. We know that profit is the difference between the total revenue and the total cost. So with one worker, the total revenue is 800 and the total cost is 500. So the profit is 300. With two workers, total revenue is 1,500, total cost is 1,000, so the difference is 500. With three workers, total revenue is 2,100, total cost is 1,500, so the difference is 600. With four workers, total revenue is 2,600, total cost is 2,000, so the difference is 600. With five workers, total revenue is 3,000, total cost is 2,500, so the profit is 500. So now that we have calculated this, the question here is, what is the optimal level of labor to demand? So to answer this question, we already stated that a firm will maximize profit when they hire up to the point where the difference between the total revenue and the total cost is the highest. So if we look at this profits over here, we can see that the highest difference between the total revenue and the total cost is when the firm has four workers. So the restaurant's profit is at its highest level when it has four workers. So following the rational rule of hiring until wages equal the marginal revenue product, the firm will maximize its profit when it has four workers. So you can see that we have 600 here and we have 600 here as well. So someone will ask, why not 3 by 4? In answering that question, it's best to look at it at the marginal level. When we had an additional worker from 1 to 2, the difference here in the profit is positive, which is 200. So it's beneficial for the firm to have more workers because an additional person might bring more profit to the firm. When we had someone else to increase the number of workers to 3, the difference in the profit from 500 to 600 is still positive, which is 100. Then when the restaurant had an additional worker, increasing the number to 4, the difference between the profit is now 0. And then when the firm had an additional worker, increasing the number to 5, the profit now reduced to 500. Immediately, you can see that hiring 5 number of workers is not an efficient option. The firm should always hire up to the point where the marginal profit the additional worker brings is 0. If you hire at the point where in marginal terms the profit is positive, you are not being efficient. If it's positive, it simply means that any other person that you hire will still add up to the total profit. It's important to hire up to the point where, in marginal terms, the difference between your initial profit and your new profit is 0. This is at the point where we have full number of workers. So this is all that we have on our second lesson on labor demand. The next lesson is going to be on labor demand curve and the diminishing marginal product. If you enjoyed today's lesson, consider subscribing. Thank you.